Well, it's a crisis primarily of the economy, but of course it is spelling disaster for social life in a big way too. And in those places where healthcare is a problem, including most of the world, but America too, because there's no universal health care, even though they have very good quality medical care too at the other end. Those cases, the crisis would be also a health crisis. But the basic genesis, the development of the crisis, has to be traced to what went wrong with economic policy making. I think the world grappled with the fact, rightly, that the market economy was quite dynamic and did well. But it didn't really recognize the fact that the market economy did well, A, supplemented by a lot of activities by the state, and B, restrained a little by the state so that you don't allow irresponsible speculative investment of a kind that even 250 years ago Adam Smith was worried about. He called them prodigals and projectors who are always busting up the market economy. You have to be very careful of them. So I think what we needed was recognition of the positive role of the market economy, but not any kind of belief that it is sufficient on its own. Unfortunately, we had the second as well as the first, and the crisis to a great extent is connected with it. And the fact that this is the period in which the financial instruments were becoming more sophisticated, you had derivatives, you have markets and markets and markets, made it even harder to trace responsibility. Just when the role of the state in supervising was needed to be emphasized, it disappeared under a political dogmatic position that was initiated by President Reagan and then worked through actually even the Democratic years, even the Clinton administration until the Bush administration. For the first time there's a change in that. So I think the ingredients of the crisis include bad economic policy. It also includes an overconfidence on just one part of a successful combination, which is the market economy and the state institutions, just emphasizing one. And that's the causation in my judgment. And of course the results are economic, social, political, and health. Well, I think that's a bit of an unfair question because they address different issues. Let me first take Smith and Marx, and then I will take Smith and Keynes. As far as Smith and Marx is concerned, you have to bear in mind that even though there are many people who describe themselves as Marxists today, Marx was himself a Smithian in a strong way. He got most of his economic analysis initiated by Smith's model, Smith's thinking. He's very respectful of Smith. There's a lovely passage where John Stuart Mill had said that he was a follower of Smith. Marx got unbelievably angry about that, and he said, how can this complete nincompoop, John Stuart Mill, claim to be in the same boat as that of the great master of economics, namely Adam Smith? Now, of course, poor Mill hadn't said anything like that. He just said he was following Smith. But you can understand that Marx wasn't seeing himself as in opposition to Smith. He did think that he had to carry the analysis much further, which Smith had not done, and which he tried to do. So I don't think there's a real tension between their positions at all. But it's also true that while Smith was also concerned with liberty, and that was something which is very big in John Stuart Mill, it's big in Marx, but more in early Marx, in sort of 1844 economic philosophic manuscript, or in German ideology. But it's not so much in Capital, Volume 1, Volume 2, which is much more Smith the economist. The Keynes is a much narrower character than either Marx or Smith. He had interesting things to say. Sometimes outside economics, I still think that the best book that he ever wrote was the book on probability, which is a very good book, very much a Bernoullian book about subjective probability, and a really interesting philosophical book. In economics, he was concerned with a very limited range of issues: monetary control, its reach and its limits. He wanted to make unemployment history, as the term is now, like poverty being history. He wanted to make unemployment history, and he was concerned with that. But he wasn't concerned with the shape of a just economy. He wasn't concerned with inequality that much. The person with whom he argued on unemployment a lot, a standard classical economist, namely Pigou. Now, Pigou was much more interested in inequality. He was much more interested in social services. He was much more interested in poverty. Pigou's definition of economics was it's in the mean streets and hollowed lives that the subject of economics begins. I don't think Keynes ever saw it that way. He saw economics as a good technocratic subject in which you could do very good things by intelligent public policy, and which he suggested. So he's a narrower character. There's a lot to learn from Keynes, but if you try to confine yourself only to Keynes, that wouldn't do. You need a lot of Smith, you need some of Marx, you need some of Mill. There's quite a lot of things to draw on. Smith particularly, because he is really the combiner of these two trends of thought. His first book, Theory of Moral Sentiment, which was published in 1759, is the 250th anniversary now. Penguin is producing a new edition in which I'm writing the foreword, explaining why Smith is so relevant today. And I think that is so, and that's all about moral issues. And that's relevant for economics too. In fact, when he went into Wealth of Nations, Smith described it, saying this deals with one part of my engagement in the theory of moral sentiments. And I think we have to see his economics connected with it. It's that insight that we very much need today, which is lost. It's not present in Keynes at all. It was a little bit more present in Pigou, and it has to come back a lot more today.